Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here, and today, as you could guess by the title, yep, it's Fileserver Fiasco, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4. So, yep, we're doing stuff with the file server again. Now, you may or may not be able to hear in the background over everything between the noise of the UPS, between the noise of the Eaton PowerWare 9130 UPS on the back desk and just ambient house noise and microphone preamp hiss and YouTube's compression and re-encoding process doing us absolutely no favors, but you might be able to hear another computer running in the background. So, and can you even see it? No, but very attentive users, particularly the Linux operating system, might be able to see HTOP peeking in the corner right there. So, yes, we are going to be migrating the file server to a new system. Well, technically a new build, but certainly not actually new hardware. No, we're going a few years forward on the hardware timeline here, from about 2008, 2009 to about 2011, 2013, thereabouts. As you may or may not know, the current file server, the file server that we're going to be migrating off of, has 4 gigs of DDR2-800 memory. Because it's DDR, the memory is actually clocked at 400 megahertz, but you get 800 mega transfers per second out of it. And it's got 4 gigs of DDR2 800 memory. It's got a Intel Core 2 Quad Q8300 in there, and as you saw by the clip that I spliced in before the beginning of this video, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner whenever it's under load. Like, it actually sounds as if there's a shop vac running in the next room over. That's how loud it is. And if you're a room over from the file server, it actually sounds like a shop vac running 2 rooms over. So, yeah. The system is getting pretty old. The power supply, I believe, is in need of service. It needs to have that awful tan glue of death removed from it. And I can't remember if it actually needs a recapping or not. I know we went over this in Fileserver Fiasco 3 right before we did the whole big ZFS migration and everything. The motherboard has some bad capacitors on it. I don't imagine they've gotten any better. In fact, I actually wouldn't be surprised if there were more bad capacitors on it. And if the power supply didn't need a recap before, it probably needs one now. So, and the system is slow. I mean, the system does all right. However, it has a very rare occasional hiccup. And again, the whole CPU fan sounding like a shop vac in the next room over thing is getting pretty old. And I noticed it's fairly lacking in the computational department, especially when it comes to ZFS compression and online compression and decompression, because I do have that option turned on the 2 zpools. Because disk space, well, the more I can, the more I can compress things down transparently and save on some disk space, the better. So, anyways, the new file server in the system is right here. That's the new file server system. This system is built into a pretty nice Antec computer case. There's 2 dual 120mm intake fans on the front, and then there's probably a 140mm exhaust fan on top. Those 3 fans have blue LEDs in them, and we have a 120mm exhaust back there, which draws some more air across the heat sink and also exhausts some residual heat out of the case. And then we have, I believe, a 500 watt power supply that's running the show here. This system has a Gigabyte GA-970 series motherboard in it. So it's got I believe an AMD 970 series chipset, which I may or may not be at all correct there. It's got an AMD AM3 Plus socket, which currently has an AMD FX-6350 processor in it, 6 cores, 6 threads, no SMT or hyper-threading, and it is a pretty decent processor. The motherboard does have a bevy of USB ports on the back. We've got 6 USB 2.0 ports and 2 USB 3 ports. We've also got PS2, gigabit networking, standard 2-channel audio, line in, line out, and line in, line out, and microphone in. And then we've got a random NVIDIA something or another graphics card. I just threw that in there so that way the system would have graphics capability. And this just has the usual card of ports on here. We've got VGA, DVI, and HDMI. The DVI, I imagine that is a pretty capable DVI port. You can probably run DVI single link devices for sure, probably DVI dual link, and going by the extra connections there on the left hand side of the port, you can stick an adapter on here and get VGA out of that. And then of course we have HDMI, probably HDMI 1.1, 1.0 or 1.1, maybe 1.1A. But I don't intend on using the HDMI output. In fact, you can see I've got the VGA output connected, because whenever we get this thing planted into its new home, VGA will be the video connection standard of choice. So, but this has been something I've wanted to do for quite some time, and previously, and before I actually got the system core that we're running here, and as well as the case that we're using, it was looking like I was going to have to actually buy all new hardware for a new file server build, but that turned out not to be the case. I mean, there's pros and cons to that. Pros is that this is going to be pretty cheap replacement system. The only money I've really had to spend on here, the only money I've really had to actually spend on here is just the is just for an adapter tray that'll be showing soon. Trying to get the camera set up here, turn this lamp off. And just for a couple of adapter trays that I'll be showing soon. That'll allow me to mount multiple 2.5 inch devices such as slim hard drives or SSDs into a single 3.5 inch bay. So we can see here I've got Linux running on this system, and I don't actually have any storage devices installed in here at this time. What I'm doing is I've got a PXE server running on my file server, and I PXE booted this system over the Tech Room network and loaded up System Rescue CD, and I've launched Tmux here. I've got it split up into 4 panes, as you can see. I've got HTOP in the top right. I've got a watch command running that invokes the sensors command every second. I've got Prime 95 running down in the lower right corner, and then I've got fan control running in the lower left corner. So a peculiarity that I noticed about this system's BIOS is that you can only get BIOS level fan control if you connect a 4-pin fan to the fan headers on the motherboard. But if you have a 3-pin fan connected, it's just going to run at full power all the time. But if you have a 3-pin fan connected, you're not going to be able to control it with the fan control settings in the BIOS, but if you install and configure some fan control software, such as the cleverly named fan control in Linux here, you can take full control of 3-pin fans on the system. So I've got all the case fans set to 100% output. All these fans are multi-speed those Antec multi-speed fans. Like, they've actually got a physical switch where I can set the fan speed, and so I've either got them plugged straight into 12-volt power, or I've got their outputs on the motherboard set to 100%. And I don't plan on controlling the fan speed in software, because I've got the speed switches set up the way I want them to be. The only fan on the system that's actually under any sort of software control is the CPU fan, and the CPU fan is on one of those really nice all-copper Zalman CPU heatsinks, which I've got pasted down with Noctua NT-H1 thermal paste. Same thermal paste I use on my main workstation system. And as you can see, the all 6 cores are at 100% load. The load average is like 6.02, 6.03, and 6.02 for the 5, 10, and 15 minute averages respectively. And as we can see, Prime 95 just went over to. It looks like Prime 95 just started another set of iterations. The CPU temperature is barely 46 degrees C. I don't believe the temp sensor can. I don't believe the way the motherboard is set up. I don't believe that it reports anything in terms of tenths of a degree Celsius. So, yeah, it's either 45 or 46 C. And that is perfectly safe. With AMD FX series processors, what I've read is that about 65 C is the maximum you want to go for 24/7 operation, and then 70 or 75 C is your absolute hard cutoff. You cannot go any higher than that without risking damaging or killing the processor. So, and I'm running a blended Prime 95 test, so that way it stresses system memory and all the processor cores. Consumes a fair amount of power. It consumes a fair bit of power, 111, 110, 112 watts, as you may or may not be able to see by the Power 1 PCI adapter reading at the very top left of the screen. So this is, I believe, 125 watt TDP CPU. And I believe the motherboard itself maxes out at 125 watts, which is fine. So, but yeah, this system has been running Prime 95 for quite some time. This particular instantiation has been going for about 25, 27 hours or so, because I had to play memory module bingo, because the memory kit that I had in here initially, which was part of the memory kit that I pulled out of my main workstation 2 or 3 months ago, is absolutely and completely defective. I figured that the memory kit that I pulled out may have had only 1 or 2 bad modules, but no, all four modules are completely bad. So that's what you get whenever you ship memory modules in non-ESD safe packaging. Do not ship memory modules in non-ESD safe packaging, or you're going to damage every single memory module. Just don't do that. That's a bad idea. Anyways, Prime 95 has been going strong for over 24 hours, so if there were any problems, I believe that if there were any problems with this system's hardware as it stands, Prime 95 would have either lost a worker thread, which is what it liked to do before I played memory module bingo and put a decent memory kit in here, yeah, where I'd come in one day or 1 hour and find that Core 5 would lose. Yeah, Core 5 would be completely idle because its worker thread would have died because of faulty memory causing it to return incorrect results. So I'm not actually searching for Mersenne primes on here. I'm only running Prime 95 to stress test the system. So, but yeah, everything seems to be working well. So I'll go ahead and shut down. I'll go ahead and shut down Prime 95. Exit that window. Oh yeah, and I had Xorg running because before I played Memory Module Bingo, what would happen is the X server would just completely lock up. Like my mouse cursor would move around, but I wouldn't be able to select anything or move any windows around or anything of that sorts. So I'll just go ahead, log out here, which will tell the X server to shut down. And quit HTOP. And as we can see, our CPU temperature has already come down to 33 degrees C and is continuing to drop at a pretty decent pace. So that is a very, very good heatsink that I've got on there. I don't know exactly where the TDP tops out on that heatsink, but I imagine it'd be pretty high because not only is it an all-copper heatsink, it's a 6 heat pipe design. And I'd really wish that I just shut down fan controls, so now the CPU fan's running at 100%. But I really wish Noctua would come out with an all-copper heatsink. So I'll go ahead and shut the system down. This here is the side of the case on the new file server, and it just lifts straight up and off. You don't have to pull it back and then lift it off or anything like that. Yeah, GA970A-DS3P motherboard. Yeah, Thermaltake smart 500 watt power supply in there. I'll probably buy another 500 watt power supply and put it in here because I have a surprising lack of high wattage power supplies with tons of connectors on them. And this is one of them. The chipset on this board does get quite warm, quite hot actually. So I'm not quite sure what's up with the whole loose fan mounting arrangement, but it doesn't seem to be harming anything. It's not chewing itself up on the heatsink. So, but this is an all copper heatsink with a 6 heat pipe design. I know it's really difficult to see. There we go. You can see 3 going one direction and 3 going the other direction. And our VRMs are heat sinked. At least the MOSFETs are heat sinked. The inductors and capacitors aren't. They don't seem to be terribly hot. Of course, and again, this fan is probably drawing quite over all of that, as well as across the heatsink. So yeah, we've got 6 serial ATA ports. All 6 of them will be in use after we're through, because right now one of them has the optical drive on it, and we will be adding 5 storage devices. So there's 6 3.5-inch bays here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's 6 3.5-inch bays here. We're going to be putting in 2 3.5-inch hard drives, 2 SSDs, and the boot drive, which is another 2.5-inch drive. So that'll fill up the other 5 ports. So 2 data drives and 2 SSDs, boot drive, and that'll leave 1 slot in that adapter tray open, and then that leaves me with 2 3.5-inch bays to do whatever, and that'll leave me with 2 3.5-inch bays to do whatever with. think this is a pretty basic graphics card, like a GT210. No, it's an 8400 GS with a gig of DDR3 video memory. So, I mean, certainly not bad. This system will handle 1080p 60 YouTube just fine. Yeah, the system will handle 1080p 60 YouTube just fine, and yeah, that's a 140mm exhaust fan at the top, which effectively turns the CPU heatsink into a push-pull config, because the fan on the heatsink itself pushes air across the heatsink, and then the big 140mm exhaust at the top pushes it out of the case. So, pretty ingenious way for a push-pull setup there without actually requiring two fans on the CPU heatsink. So the optical drive up here at the top, I believe is a Blu-ray, not a Blu-ray, it's a DVD rewritable drive. It's not a Blu-ray reader of any capacity, so can't use this as like a I can't use this as like a Blu-ray ripping server. And all the unused power supply connections are for the time being just stuffed up underneath the optical drive. I'll need 5 SATA connections to make this work. And let's see, there's 3, 4, 5. Okay, I will have just enough SATA ports to make this work without adapting Molex to SATA or anything like that. So, I'd say the first thing we need to do here is we need to go ahead and shut the old file server down. Now, the old file server, we're going to be permanently walking away from it. That system is going to officially enter retirement. So I've already backed up the 2 data drives off of it. Well, I've already backed up the 2 data drives in the file server. And just in case push comes to shove and I end up having to launch the ZFS DDTs during the migration, I don't think I'll have to do that, but just in case, I did go ahead and do backups. And regarding the ZFS DDT, I've got 2. If you haven't watched Fileserver Fiasco 3, stop this video, go back, watch that video. Carded up here in the corner. And basically, a quick summary of the ZFS arrangement from that video is there's 2 SSDs and there's 2 SSDs and an MD80M RAID 1 that has a ZVol on top of that, which is carved up into I think a couple of separate ZVols, either that or zpools, that have the deduplication tables for the 2 big zpools, the zpools that live on the data drives. If you lose the DDT, if you lose the deduplication tables, the zpools dependent on them are gone. You will not be able to recover them. That is just going to be the end of the road for them, and you will be restoring from backups. So in order to, I don't think I'll have to launch the DDTs, but they are they're quasi software managed. But yeah, they're quasi software managed by the Intel Rapid Storage Technology soft RAID quasi controller thing on the current file server, and they're also kind of quasi managed by MD80M. So I think what I'll do is I'll assemble. I think what I'll do to get those put back together on this new file server is I'll use MD80M, assemble those 2 drives together into a RAID 1, and I believe that'll allow me to go ahead and bring that back online, at which point I should be able to save the configuration to the MD80M configuration file, and then after that I'll be able to re-import the 2 data zpools. I'll go ahead and do a proactive scrub on everything. Probably do a full patrol read on the MD80M RAID 1. It has the DDTs on it just in case, and then I'll go from there. So, but yeah, I'll go ahead and get the camera rearranged and everything, so that way we can see the file server shut down for the last time. Alrighty, I am back. I am logged into the file server. I've got a root session open. I've decided to display top time statistics on the file server, and it's been a pretty reliable system, and it's definitely been in service more than 2 years, 78 days, 18 hours, 31 minutes, and 27 seconds. This has been the Tech Room file server since at least the year 2018. So 6 years of use out of it as a file server, that's pretty good. So, you can see my reflection in the monitor. Hi there. So let's see. Go ahead and display monitor statistics. Pull it out to a year. I don't know what it is about Sony camcorders, or at least this model, but they really get exposure adjustment wrong. So, but the monitor X graphs only go back to late November of 2023, because I changed around some of the graphs and the length of the round robin data set, and it ended up creating new round robin data sets and erased everything prior. So, yeah, so I've only got historical information going back to November of 2023. So again, 4 gigs of RAM, and it's only used a little over 2 gigs. Another thing I forgot to mention, the new file server has effectively 12 gigabytes installed. Now I say effectively 12 gigabytes because while it has 16 gigabytes physically installed, 2 of the memory modules, for whatever reason, the BIOS will only make use of half of those memory modules' capacity. So those are 4 gig modules, and there's 2 4 gig modules, which means that there's 8 gigs between those 2 modules, but for whatever reason the BIOS will only allocate 4 gigs of that to operating system software. So we've only really used a little over half of the installed memory. Highest uptime logged is like 78, 79 days. So kernel usage has been kind of peaky and sporadic, usually during really big backups or ZFS scrubs. So, and that's reflected in the processor usage. Disk drive temperature, you can actually kind of see the seasonal trends that have been taking place, because average temperatures, the highest drive temp was around 120 back in November, December. We had a cold front come through. Yeah, we had a cold front come through here, which knocked it down to about 110. Then it kind of came back up, settled back down a bit. We had another cold front about the middle of January of this year, and you can kind of see that the average drive temperatures have gone up as we have crept into summer. We had a cold front about the middle of July, and they've just kind of been creeping up ever since. So that will no doubt change once we get all the drives and everything into the new file server, because there's going to be fans forcing fresh air across all the drives. So ARC usage has kind of been all over the place as the file server's done stuff. Same with ARC cache, and we can see data usage. Data usage has kind of gone up over time. It's gone up over time from 2 terabytes to just under 3 as of right now. The highest it went was 3.5 terabytes. But that was only usually during disk imaging, whenever I had new disk images coming in, but before I purged old disk images during the course of a regular backup cycle. And of course the nature of the deduplication table does kind of lead to some file system fragmentation, so not really concerning. And then the pool that is cleverly named data is where all of my mom's graphics designing stuff is stored. There's an equivalent of about 7.5 terabytes on there. Meanwhile, the actual disk usage, keeping in mind that the disk itself, it has a physical capacity of 8 terabytes, is only about 48%. So I could probably store you could store the equivalent of 16 terabytes of actual data on it before that drive fills up. And then we can see lifetime operations for both pools. Again, kind of peaky in nature. And then we've just kind of got other statistics. And it refreshed. Samba statistics here. This floats around from time to time. So, and we've got APC PSD statistics. Pause here, let you read that. And there we go. But yeah, there's not a whole lot. I mean, this system it's been busy, but it hasn't really been subjected to a lot of extremes other than the noise this thing produces when it's under load, and that's about to come to a permanent end. So I'll type the command to shut this thing down. I've got both ZFS pools marked read-only. I've got both Z pools marked read-only, and backups are up to date. So really not a whole lot I can do at this point except bite the bullet and shut it down for the last time. And there we go. That click you heard just a few seconds before it shut off was the little 2.5-inch laptop drive the file server actually boots from, parking itself. So I'll go ahead, extract the system from its cubby. I'll go ahead and extract the system from its cubby hole and get this thing up on the workbench, and then we can start transplanting drives. Okay, I am back, and I forgot just how much heat this system produces. This chipset heatsink right here, this one right here, yeah, just a couple minutes after I powered the system off, that was still hot enough to burn. So, and you can kind of see just how all jank this whole thing is. I don't even know where I've stuffed the 2.5-inch boot drive. Oh, I see. I put a piece of paper underneath it and stuck it in the little 3.5-inch bay where something could have gone, but obviously didn't. So, and then we've got the 2 data drives down here. There's not a terrible heaping collection of dust in this system. I mean, there's a little bit of dust on the There's a little bit of dust on the processor heatsink here. Okay, there's a fair bit of dust actually, but that's probably partially the reason why this thing sounded like a vacuum cleaner. But no, the power supply... Okay, that power supply is actually pretty warm. So... But yeah, this is another one of those really annoying HP computers where they have some kind of addiction to using Torx T15 screws for absolutely everything, including the hard drive cage. And so I'm going to start with removing the hard drives. And apparently my screwdriver bit also doesn't like this computer. So, got the 2 screws out of the hard drive cage. I'm going to go ahead and unplug them. I imagine these hard drives will be much happier once we get them into the new file server. So we're not sitting in there just roasting away at 40 or 50 degrees C. I'm going to get the SSDs out of here. And 2 2GB modules for DDR2. We've got adapters galore in here, it seems. Here we go. I was about to say, I hope I don't break this drive, because even though I've got a disk image backup of it, that would still be rather annoying. I'm going to go ahead and take my Molex to SATA adapter out of there with me. I kind of like that, because I kind of like those adapters. And then go ahead and get all of my SATA cables out of here. So there's some that I might carry forward, and there's some I won't. In fact, it looks like most of these cables I'm not going to carry forward, because they're just these little piddly they're just these little piddly ones that are barely 6 inches long if you stretch them. If you stretch them hard enough. And I never got what the purpose of this connector was. This little 3-pin thing. I've never seen anything that's used this connector. If you have, it'd be great. If you have, that's awesome. Feel free to leave a note down in the comment section as to what that is used for, what it might be used for. And let's see, do we have any more bad capacitors? Yeah, maybe. Some of these are rocked up on their sides a little bit. Especially that one right there. That one's tilted pretty badly. Now I'm not going to completely gut this system out. I will be taking my CMOS battery and expansion cards with me though. The expansion card, the network controller built into the system's motherboard, is a little finicky. It's a little bit oddball. It advertises gigabit full duplex, but if you plug a cable in, it'll only link up at 100 megabit full duplex. And if you try forcing the link to gigabit full duplex with something like ETH tool, it'll just crash out and reset itself to a 10 megabit half duplex, and you have to step it back up with ETH tool. So I've got a gigabit network card in here, as well as a USB 3 card, because this system didn't have USB 3 from the factory, nor did it have a properly functioning gigabit Ethernet controller. So I'll take my network controller with me. I'll take my USB 3 card with me, because I've probably got other systems that are more deserving of such a card. And I'll take my expansion slot I'll take my expansion slot covers with me as well, because I kind of want those. Yeah, because I kind of want those back. Not quite sure what I'll do with this system. I may donate it to the college that I'm attending. I might put it in my storage unit. So, okay, no need for that piece of paper anymore. It has served its purpose. We'll fire this system back up once we're through here and reset all the CMOS settings and clear my passwords out of it. So yeah, the capacitor condition on this motherboard has gotten a little bit worse. Just because I'm curious, I'll pull the power supply out of it. I almost need to use a pair of pliers to get the CPU power connector unplugged from the system, because it's in a really annoying spot on the system board. And the power supply, I don't know when, where, why, or I don't know when, where, why, or how, but it lost two of the Torx T15 screws that were holding it in. Now, you don't have to use the T15 screws that the computer ships with in order to fasten the power supply in. Standard computer screws will work. So I'll pull this power supply out and I'll open it up. And we'll get to see exactly what kind of condition the supply is in. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. So I don't know just how close this power supply is to blowing up. I do know that it has required attention for at least the past what's today? August? Yeah, at least the past 9 months. So I've probably got other power supplies that I can throw in here, and I can recap this one at my own leisure. And these 4 screws here, that is for an active power factor correction choke. Looks to be over on the secondary side. Okay, we are not in need of a recap, which is good. We just need to have that awful tan glue of death removed from it. It's turned a little bit more tan. There's some hot glue. Looks like some kind of variable, couple of variable resistors, maybe for the fan control. Maybe to adjust the fan control thermistor. I'll zoom in on it. All those capacitors are in good condition. Capacitors across the whole power supply appear to be in pretty good condition. You just have that tan glue of death that needs to come out. And whenever it starts turning tan like this, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes this stuff comes out pretty easily, other times it doesn't. Well, that's great. It lands down there between a few different capacitors and some output wiring. You know what? Probably a good idea to let this thing sit, because it looks like this glue is in that weird stage where it's kind of flexible, but it's kind of not flexible, and it just breaks apart. So it's not entirely to the danger point yet, but it needs service on the sooner side. Put that piece of insulated paper down back behind that choke. Alright, well, look what you close up. Oh, okay. There we go. Cool. So I'll throw this back together, throw it back in the system, see if it goes boom, plug it back in, see if the next screw decides to try to take my screwdriver bit with it. I think I only snugged these down the last time I had this power supply apart, but they appear to have worked themselves tighter. So I can put that screwdriver bit away, T15 back out. I'll just slide it back into the system, not plug anything back in for now. And that's that. So now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start slotting drives into place and plugging things in. I'm going to remove this SATA cable from the system before it ends up becoming a victim or causes some other part of the system to become a victim of some unfortunate accident or another. So I'm going to go grab those. You know what? Before we do that, I do want to go ahead and move over the two data drives. So we've got 12 terabytes of data here. camera's being a little over optimistic with the exposure adjustments here. I don't know why or how, but one of these screws appears to be a little bit on the rusty side. That's the 4 terabyte data drive coming out. And I think I'll slot this in the bottom of the system. Now, right now, I only have access to the screw holes on this side of the case. Because I'll need to either stand the case up or turn the case over and take the other side cover off in order to gain access to the other 2 screws. And since these drives are still under warranty, I'm not going to be showing their serial numbers or anything. If they do happen to be visible on camera, I'll obscure them. Get that hard drive cage out of the way. Go. And let's see, do I want to reuse those screws? I might as well. See how tight I cram these down. Not very. So I'll go grab those adapter trays and we'll start piecing those together. And there we go. Got these nice Corsair mounting brackets. It says for dual solid state drive, but a little 2.5 inch laptop hard drive should work. So they give me 3 sets of 4 screws with these. And these are pretty nice metal trays. So let's see, what should the orientation be on these? With that. So front of the drives should be that way. So I'll mount the SSDs first. Number 2 goes on the bottom here. That's not that very clever. They rolled the they have little baggies here with the screws in them, but they rolled the Yeah, but they put a round of tape around the bags. So, slightly annoying, but certainly not a deal breaker. So will these fit into this screwdriver? Yes, they will. So let's see. Let me slot the second SSD in. And they give nice access holes on the sides here to get in there. So that way I can take my screwdriver, stick it in there, and put the screw in. And how's that? Pretty much just going to flush mount these. We'll go ahead and mount the other SSD like so. Then I can turn it around, open up the next bag of screws and do the other side. I'll come back around to this side and snug everything down. Then, go ahead and stick it in the computer. And they also gave me a bag for the case, for the screws that secure the adapter tray to the case. Of course, I just cut the tape on this and it decides to stick itself back down somewhere. There we go. That's more like it. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down a little bit. Then open up the second box where the 160 gig boot drive will go. And since I'm only putting one drive in to this adapter tray, now that I've got that one drive installed, go ahead and slide that thing on into the case. I'll keep the extra screws around in case I ever do decide to put a second drive in there. That's all 5 drives installed in here. Of course, that leaves me room to add 3 more drives, another 2.5-inch drive into the same adapter bay, as well as another drop, as well as 2 more 3.5-inch drives farther up the stack. So now I need to plug in SATA power and data on all of these. That's right, the other side of those bays aren't screwed down yet. Of course, depending on how this all goes, I may have to completely forget that an optical drive in this system for the time being, or just adapt to SATA using that convenient little adapter thing that I pulled out of the old file server. Yep, that's what I'm going to have to do. So that goes there. That goes there. That tucks away up in there. So does that. And then I just have to connect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 SATA cables. So, let's see. There's 2. Oh, there's 3. I've got 2 blue ones, which I guess I can... One of these is a right angle cable. Plug that into the optical drive. And we'll go on, SATA port 5. And 4 and 3 can be the data drives. So how do I get away with using these SATA cables? Maybe. Work. And 2 and 1 will be the DDT SSDs. 0 will be the boot drive. If I want to add any more drives to this system, I'll either have to delete the optical drive, which I'm not above doing, or install a SATA controller card in here. Or what I'll more likely do, because actually finding a decent SATA controller card seems to be a near impossibility these days, I'll get a SAS card and use a breakout cable that'll get me 4 more SATA connections. Because you can still find quality SAS cards on Amazon these days. Now SATA, well, you're kind of out of luck unless you want to go for one of the many cheap and cheerful Chinese sellers that seem to only have Silicon Image 3112 and 3114 series controllers available. I mean, well, those aren't bad. You're limited to SATA 1, so you're limited to SATA 1, so 1.5 gigabits per second, no native command queuing or any sort of performance optimizations. I mean, you're stuck back in like 2000 in terms of disk controller technology. So here we go. Now we're getting down to the meat and potatoes of it. Now we're looking at the side over here. All I need to do here is put in 8 screws. So I'll start with the hard drive down here, one of the data drives. You can also see some of the fan wiring. And then we've got the other 2 screws for the second data drive. These little Torx T15s, tiny things. Don't want to cross-thread it. I did that. I cross-threaded a screw mounting a hard drive once and ended up snapping the screw off in the drive. I don't know if I've still got that hard drive or not. You know what I think I just did? I think I just put the screws in there that I was using on the computer case. It's not the smartest thing in the world to do. There we go. Threads right in, no problem. Okay, cool. That's all the drives and trays screwed in. Go ahead, put the side of the case back on. come back around to this side and go ahead and give all the screws one last little snug. Yeah, one last little snug down. And then go ahead, probably throw the case cover back on, plug it in, and fire it up. And this doesn't require any special connectivity or anything of that sort. I mean, basically it just needs, the bare minimum for this thing to operate is power. Yeah, power and a network connection. That's it. Because 99.9% of the time, I don't even have the KVM switch set to the file server's input. If I do, that's usually because I'm cold starting the tech room from a cold and dark condition, or I am disk imaging the file server and pretty much need direct console access to it. Okay, plug in the power. Apparently I have the power switch set to on. Turn that off because the PS2 ports on this system are always hot. Plug in the video cable, VGA in this case. Even though this monitor has DDI outputs, I opt not to use them. Okay, power supply is discharged. Plug the keyboard in, plug the mouse in. Probably not going to need the mouse, but it's there, might as well plug it in. Yeah, the firewall system, which runs FreeBSD hardened as a core component of OpenSense, even though there's no graphical applications available on the system console, I still get to humor myself because of the mouse cursor, because it displays a mouse cursor. That actually moves around whenever I move the mouse. So, yeah, FreeBSD, I get to humor myself just slightly with it. So, here goes. I should probably turn the power supply on first. I hear hard drives coming up. CPU fans running at full tilt, keyboard initialization. Monitor lights up. And we have a BIOS setup screen. Awesome. Okay, we are in system setup. This is a whole lot easier to navigate with strictly a keyboard. So let's page through everything, make sure that stuff makes sense. 25C CPU temp. All our fans are detected. Warning temp is 60C. Okay, everything makes sense there. ATA port information. We've got all our devices. And yep, that is exactly how I plugged everything in. Boot drive on SATA port 0. DDT SSDs on ports 1 and 2. Data drives on ports 3 and 4. And the optical drive on port 5. So everything is detected. We haven't let the magic smoke out of anything yet. Let's go ahead and set the boot option, the first boot option, to our 160 gig drive. And let's disable the other two boot options. security option, setup. So I am going to set a setup password on here. UEFI legacy, looks fine to me. Option ROM is on. Legacy only. I'm setting an administrator password here. HCI. I don't know what to set this as. As SATA type. Okay. I don't know what to set this as. And it makes me wonder if all of these ports are SATA 3 capable. I'm going to leave that as HCI for now, and if I have to go back, and change that, I will. Grub loading. Welcome to Grub. Let's go ahead and boot. Let's not boot. XZ compressed data is corrupt. System halted. That is, that's the first time I've ever seen that error message, and I've been dailying Linux for over a decade. Oh yeah, it really halted it. Okay. Let's tickle the reset button on the system and see what happens. Might have to switch it from HCI to RAID mode. So let's see if that gets it to boot. I might get a RAID controller sign-on screen. Now whether it's just going to be Intel Rapid RAID option ROM version 3. Go ahead and enter the setup utility here. Or let's not enter the setup utility. Loading initial RAM disk. Okay, I guess I had to switch it to RAID mode. System appears to be coming up just fine. Let's change the exposure. Failed to start. Import ZFS pools by cache file. Unable to load firmware for a Realtek NIC. Failed to TFTPD server, which makes sense. Okay, that's first thing we want to do. Just grab a root shell. This keyboard kind of sucks. Huh, my caps lock was on, okay. Okay, looks like our NIC appears to be up. Can we ping Google? Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and stop the Samba server, and I'm actually going to go ahead and disable it because I don't want it, because right now I don't want it starting when the system boots. Alright, that makes sense. Got our two SSDs. I managed to get the MDADM RAID 1 back up and running. It was giving me an error saying that it wasn't connected to an Intel Rapid Storage RAID controller, and so I googled the error message, and surprisingly enough, I managed to find a relevant result pretty quickly, and it had me give an argument, set a environment variable that is listed as IMSM no platform equals 1. So basically you tell MDADM that you are not on a system where the controller is available. So I ran a command. I'll put it on screen somewhere around here. And basically, it tells MDADM that Intel Matrix Storage Technology controller, whatever it is not available on the system, and to go ahead and take that into consideration. Basically, ignore the fact that there's no controller available, and assemble the array anyways. And that actually started the array and got the ZFS DDTs up and running. So I went ahead and I saved. So I went ahead and saved the configuration, and I'll go ahead and cat proc md stat here to get the current array status. No unused devices, and looks like everything's up and running. So linear, multipath, RAID 0, 1, 6, 5, 4, 10. Those are probably the available personalities. Auto read only, RAID 1. Okay. Yeah, so the array has definitely been started. I exported my configuration to the MDADM configuration file. Went ahead and updated the initial RAM file system, so that way there's an up-to-date copy of it available. So that way you can go ahead and auto start the array on boot. And speaking of auto start and booting, I'll go ahead and reboot the system and see if it manages to auto start the array. I'm just going to let this go all on its own because I'm kind of simulating what happens whenever I'm doing a headless or an unattended, whenever I'm doing a headless or an unattended boot. Such as when we're coming back up from a power failure and I'm just hitting power buttons and watching things boot. Those two things where it says failed to start import ZFS pools by cache file and start the TFTP HPA server, those are expected because one of the drives is encrypted, and that Lux container doesn't get auto unlocked on boot, so that's probably the first thing it tries, and it fails. So it generates that error message, and then that causes the second error message because the TFTP HPA server relies on a directory that is on the encrypted drive, and because that directory is not available, it fails to start and throws that message up onto the console. ahead and get a root console here. Okay, looks like it didn't start the array. Array line devmd imsm0 has no identity information. Huh. Container has been assembled with 2 drives. Alright, says it's inactive. Okay, I am back. Basically, long story short, the MDADM is going to require quasi-manual intervention to get the RAID 1 back online after every time the system boots. And I created a couple of scripts. The first script goes ahead and assembles the RAID 1 and actually starts it and makes it read-write. And the second script actually goes ahead, imports the zpools, prompts me to unlock the encrypted hard drive, and then goes ahead and imports that zpool. So I'm going to go ahead and run sensors detect, as well as PWM config, and go ahead and get the automatic fan control set up. If I run sensors right now, we get a really basic output here. So sensors detect is pretty much just going to be a whole bunch of run the command and hit enter a bunch of times, because I did all the advanced scanning and whatnot versus just smashing enter, and there was absolutely no difference between the two. So I mean, you could probably take what you're about to see out of context and it would look like something out of a hacking scene. And there we go. So, okay, you know what? Scratch all of that. There we go. Cool. So now we have full sensor readout information. Now it's time to run PWM config. Of course it's not going to find that. It's not a valid package name. There we go. Let's see if this provides the PWM config utility. Yep, there we go. Yes, I do want to set up that output for manual control. And that was a processor fan. I'll go ahead and tell it to generate a detailed correlation. The processor in this system isn't under any kind of load at all at the moment. so I'm not very worried about any sort of overheating happening. Hardware Mon 3, temp 2. Hardware Mon 3 PWM1 is the output responsible for controlling the speed of the processor fan, and Hardware Mon 3 temp 2 input is the actual temperature thermistor in the CPU socket that the processor is installed in. So that's why I'm selecting the fan output and the temperature sensor inputs that I am. Let's go 20C. That sounds good. It says it stops at 30. I'll accept that as a default. And that sounds good to me. So I'll save and quit. And there we go. So that's PWM config and sensors detect run and fan controls set up and ready to go. Make sure that's set up to auto start when the system boots. Looks like it. Just to be really sure, I'm going to enable it. So but it pretty much looks like we're just about all done here. Need to, whenever the system isn't busy, do a reboot and verify that my scripts work as intended. What I could do is I could drop those scripts into a location where scripts are executed automatically upon system start. And ETH tool isn't on here. Actually, let's look at ifconfig enp3s0. Could just run a speed test, see what kind of results I get. If it's over 100 megabits, then yeah, the link's up. Yeah, 868 down, 802 up. Yeah, we're rolling it. We're rolling it gigabit. So, and for anyone curious, we do have symmetrical gigabit fiber to the home internet service, courtesy of our local power company. So, but yeah, let's see. I'll wait till the file server's not busy, and then we'll go ahead, conduct our reboots, and see what happens. Not reg boot, no, reboot. Let's go ahead and run the reboot. Alrighty, system resets. Oh, I guess we're not getting into that then. I had a look at it earlier, and it contains absolutely nothing of importance for this particular situation. Pretty limited in options anyways. Notice the processor fan hasn't settled back down. Configuration appears to be outdated. Huh, okay. Anyways, let's run the RAID start script here. Alright, container's been assembled with 2 drives, started with 2 devices. Cool. Now this script should go ahead and take care of everything else. Looks like it did. So let's see. Let's run pwm config. There we go. So that's up and running again. Alright, those two services appear to be running. Okay, need to modify that script. NFS kernel server. And that's up and running. Alright, let's reboot once again and see if doing that will make it start the... see if doing that will make it run that script on startup, which will go ahead and start the RAID, start the MDADM RAID 1. Well, I heard fan controls start, because the CPU fan is no longer running at 1,000,000 miles a minute. Let's see, yep. Looks like it started the RAID array, and the reason, so it's got two zpools here. The first one is special, that contains the DDTs for the two big data drives, and then the second one here is the 8 terabyte pool, very cleverly called data, and it is unavailable because it says sufficient replicas, and then it goes on to say one or more devices contains corrupted data. The pool cannot be imported due to damaged devices or data, and it's listing ZD0 as unavailable. So zpool import that, and then get another list here. Now I get slightly different results. DD3 state faulted. So now that I've imported the zpool containing the two DDTs, I get some slightly different output here from just a plain zpool import. It does list the second zpool here. It says it's faulted, the pool metadata is corrupted, the pool cannot be imported due to damaged devices or data. That's only because I haven't actually unlocked the drive, and that's only because I haven't actually unlocked the drive and made the underlying zpool available to import. Now the big zpool data, that is online and ready to go. So what I'll do is I'll run this importpools.sh script that I created. Pool with that name already exists. That's because I've already imported it. Looks like it's imported course, that's not going to work. That's the wrong password. Looks like it's already imported the data zpools. And it's prompting me to unlock the other drive containing the smaller zpools. And it looks like everything's completed. No pools available to import because they've already all been imported. If I do a zpools status, all the pools are online. And let's see, I know the data zpools is already accessible because that had to be accessed earlier. Let's try that. Okay. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like both zpools are accessible. Samba's alive and well. TFTPD is, gotta wait on systemd to parse these binary log files. I don't know who thought binary log files was a good idea, but they seriously need to have their head examined. Okay, that's alive and well. Let's look at NFS kernel server, and that's alive and well. So yeah, I'd say we are good to go. And right now I'm the only guy on the box. So I'll shut this thing down. Yeah, well, I'll shut this thing down, shove it back into its cubby hole, and fire it back up down there and see how it goes. I don't know why I started the camera and then immediately went to adjusting the focus.